Welcome to the second of these Riichi Nomi New York City guest lectures. For those who were here last week, welcome back. Those who weren't, welcome, and hopefully this will be a fun and educational experience for everyone. Now, the same as last week, in the interest of this being a great learning experience, I'm going to lay out some behavior guidelines for the lecture. So everyone is going to be kept on server mute if it's not your turn to participate and interact with this excellent content. Now, you can see in this lecture participation channel, there's that post from Tian where you can react to be called upon to participate in the interactive questions that are going to come later in the lecture. Now, don't worry, if you don't react there, you won't be cold called. But if you do react there, it'll be an amazing opportunity to practice your learning and have some fun like that. Now, if you have reacted that, when Tian calls for a volunteer, a mod will unmute you to answer and then remute you while you're done. And if you have any comments or questions outside that structure, just feel free to type them into lecture participation, and a mod will read them out to Tian, who can take the questions as they have time. Now, outside of that, as always, with our Riichi Nomi behavior guidelines, absolutely no hateful or rude comments will be tolerated in voice or chat. We're all friends here, so that's fine. Now, so that the others can enjoy these lectures later if they weren't able to be here, they are going to be recorded and posted up on the Riichi Nomi YouTube channel, including any audience participation. That video will probably be up by about next week, and we'll link it out when it does. Now, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to introduce our lecturer tonight, Tian. Now, Tian is here from the Baltimore Mahjong Club, although is living in Japan at the moment while pursuing their PhD. Now, in addition to playing Riichi Mahjong for 2.5 years, Tian has also won a state geography bee and has got to meet Alex Trebek. So those are some interesting facts that I'm sure will just make all the information about 5 and 6 block theory even better. So I'm going to go ahead and hand that off to Tian now to get started with our guest lecture.
Thank you so much for that excellent introduction, Claire. I'm really glad to be here tonight with you guys. And yeah, so let's get started without much ado. So the lecture that I prepared today is titled 5 and 6 block theory. And so we're going to try and compare basically the two basic fundamental ways of building your hand. And so this is really a lecture that is focused on the early and mid game. It's focused on kind of seeing how your hand is dealt and where it can go. Sorry, I'm getting. Are there any audio issues? I'm sorry. I'm gonna hold on until they give me the go ahead.
You cut out for a minute, but I can hear you fine now.
Okay. Everything seems to be going fine from my end. Okay.
I think you're fine to keep going.
Okay, so I'm gonna get the I have the go ahead. Okay, so without much ado, let's get started. First, let's talk about the goals and why you have to use block theory. The biggest reason is that it really is the most straightforward path to make a hand. As the slides show, it really is meant to help you just try to think about your hand, think about its potential, think about its speed, think about its value. It helps you make these. It helps you evaluate those things separately, so that you can make decisions about it to fit your situation, right? Obviously, a lot of theory is designed for a flat point situation, but in reality, right, you're often playing to have a specific goal, right? Perhaps you need to get out of first place with a monk, get out of fourth place with a monk on. Perhaps you really want to solidify your first place. Perhaps you're trying to, somebody is in last place, they're the dealer, and you kind of want to, just screw them extra and move on from their dealer. So like these are all things that you have. These are like situational goals, and block theory and helping you about and thinking about your blocks, right? It really is supposed to help you achieve those, or at least have give yourself more of a concrete idea of how to get there. And by doing that, it helps you do that by breaking like large tough decisions about your hand into smaller chunks. Now, there are two places where you don't really want to use block theory too much that I want to talk about. The first is if you see your hand, it's really spotty, it's never going to complete, and maybe it's like the dreaded 4 or 5 shanten, and you just decide that, building your hand using blocks and building 4 blocks of 3 and a pair is probably not going to ever happen. You might just not you might just totally disregard block theory. In that kind of situation, perhaps you're going to go for something like kokushi, perhaps you're going to go for something like chi-toi, but one of the ways that you don't. But according to the best statistics that I have, about 97.5% of all hands that are won indeed are not chi-toi nor kokushi, which means that basically block theory is applicable to the vast majority of cases when you're building a hand. And so let's go into the fundamentals. We're going to start with the fly block theory because, as I said earlier, it really is the most prevalent, useful, and foundational aspect of playing Mahjong. And like I mentioned, it's because 97% or more of hands are won using the standard 4 sets of 3 in a pair. Now, what we're going to do is basically looking at different ways of evaluating your 4 sets and pair from your starting hand, right? Or figuring out what we're missing from that hand, and then maximizing your hand's potential by making the most efficient discards. And so as a really early practice, I'm going to show you a hand, and then we're going to try to first break it into 5 blocks. And so here it is, right? Can anybody help me break this hand into 5 constituent blocks? I'm asking for audience participation right here.
Greg, I have unmuted you, picking on Riichi Nomi to be our first volunteer here. So Greg, why don't you go ahead and take this one?
Oh, wow. Okay, give me a second. I have to just open up the video. Okay, so 5 blocks. Let's see. We have the one set right there, 1, 2, 3 pin. We have the 5, 6, so which could you're waiting on 4, 7 there. You have 2 pairs, so that's 4, and then you have the 9, 7, 5 man, which if you draw an 8 or 6, that becomes a little block right there. And that.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry, I cut you off. Yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly the kind of answer I was looking for. Right, so this is how this hand would be basically divided into 5 blocks. And I think this was a introductory example because the block divisions really are quite clear here. We have 5 blocks that are all, pretty strong-ish blocks. Like they are good blocks. They're very workable blocks. You'd be happy to have this hand. I mean, I'd be happy to have this hand in my starting hand. I'm sure you would too. And we have 1 single floater, a sha, which is not super bad because it's probably, usually a safe tile. But this is the basics of the 5 block theory, and then we can go into talk about what kinds of blocks there are, right? So in this situation, we have only 1 block that is complete, 2 plus the pair, 2 including the pair, right? So we have the 1, 2, 3 that is complete, but every other block is incomplete. You're still missing something. And sometimes when you're building your hand, you're going to have to evaluate which incomplete blocks are better than others. And there's a lot of ways to do that. So we can go into the second slide, and we'll show you. So here I have some common blocks that are Ishanten blocks that I have chosen to kind of put on a kind of sliding scale of what is a stronger and what is a weaker block. The reason why this slide is important is because using 5 block theory to maximize the potential of your hand absolutely requires you to identify the blocks in your hand first, right? Identify whether your primary goal is to complete the blocks that you have, improve your weaker blocks, or to actually get to having 5 blocks in the first place. So we're leaving out the completed blocks because I'm assuming that the players here can tell what's complete and what's not. So let's go and evaluate some of the Wanshanten blocks. So these are the very common Ishanten blocks. From the strong side to the weaker side, we have things such as the Ryankan that is also a pair. This is really, really great because it's the foundational part of having the so-called perfect Ishanten, right? And then slightly worse than that, we'll have like your normal Ryankan, and then we have the kanchan and the pair, right? Something that is good because it has potential to grow into a Ryankan normally, or to build into an anko, a triplet of 3, or it can become a head, and then you can drop. This can be your pair, and then maybe you can drop the form on later when you don't need it. In the middle, we have this shape that is two middle weights right together, and this is called a Ryankan. And this is actually quite a strong block because not only because of the fact that it can accept essentially 2 sides, but also it has the potential to grow into a Ryankan if you pick up like a 3 so. So it really is a strong block. It's underappreciated, and these blocks are also quite important because you don't really want to cut one of them before you're ready to, because you can easily put yourself in 40-10 if you cut this block too early. Now, moving on. I'm so sorry, the slide just like reset. And so here we have 2 pairs. This is usually 2 pairs. It can perhaps be your head. Sometimes you're going to, especially if they're adjacent pairs, sometimes it's actually going to build into like a run of 3, and you're going to end up cutting 1 from each of the 2 pairs. But it has some potential. And then you have the kanchans, which are middle weights. And finally, you have the penchans. So I am so sorry. I cannot check Discord right now, but I hear something going off like constantly. Is there something that needs my attention, or is that something that I can safely ignore?
You can definitely ignore the pings. However, you do have a question from Steve. Can you elaborate why you've ranked kanchan pair higher than the Ryankan when the Ryankan has 2 more tiles of acceptance? And Steve, I took you off server mute if you want to talk to Tian about it.
Oh, the kanchan pair versus this. That would probably be a mistake. You're right. This has 6 tiles of acceptance, and this has 8. So Steve, good catch. I just put these in the wrong order. Like I said, Ryankan is really a good shape. Is one of my favorite shapes, and it deserves to have a higher place. So very good catch there. And then finally, we have like 2 of the kind of worst shapes, right? The shapes that you might be willing to cut early on, even breaking up a block to try and fish for other blocks. So you have the you have a kanchan, which only waits on 1 middle tile, and then finally you have a penchan. And the reason why a kanchan and a penchan are not equally bad, even though they both accept 4 tiles, is because of 2 reasons. One is a penchan, right, which is an edge, which is like an edge weight, does not really have good potential at all for becoming a 2-sided weight, right? So when you have a penchan, which is when you have a kanchan, which is a middle weight, you can still hope to draw the 6 mon, for example, in this circumstance. If you draw the 6, you have the 6 and 7, and you can drop a 9, you have a 2-sided weight. So that's the first reason, is because kanchans do not have that, because penchans do not have that potential. And the second reason is, as a final weight, tiles that are closer to the edges are more likely to come out as a final weight. And when you have a penchan, you are waiting on the 3s and the 7s. When you have a kanchan, you're waiting on the 2s and the 8s, right? In the best case of scenario. Obviously, there are middle kanchans, which are often tragically bad, and you kind of feel sad if you have to reach on it. But edge kanchans are indeed stronger than the penchan shape, so that's why those are in that order. So let's move on to some actual practice. These are questions, these are scenarios that I've taken from specific games that I've played in the recent past. And so this is a typical question of block selection. We have drawn the six mon, and now we have overflowed, technically having 6 blocks, right? But we need 5. So what do we cut down to go back to 5? Would anyone like to offer their opinion?
I have unmuted Anne to take this question. Take it away, Anne.
So, hi. In this scenario, I think we would have to choose between the 4 and 6 man and the 3 and 5 pin. Because every other block we have a pair, we have a complete block with the 6, 7, 8. That could be also 5, 6, 7. And we have the 6, 7 in Sozu, which is a penchan, two-side weight, so I wouldn't touch that. I would probably go with the 3 pin because it's harder to upgrade into a side weight for the 3 and 5 since we already see one of the 6s. It's kind of harder without the full discard, but I would probably go with that for this shape.
Thank you so much for your input. So I think it's definitely a good call to say that this is really a decision between the 3-5 pin right here and the 4-6 mon. And so personally in this situation, I chose the 4 mon because the 3-5 pin is next to the 6-7-8 shape, and therefore will improve upon drawing 4 kinds of tiles. It improves as a weight by drawing the 2-6P as well as the 7-9P, right? In addition to the fact that it simply just completes if we draw the 4P. And finally, if we we only really become happy with a ramen if we draw a 3 or a 7M, right? Keeping the manzu. But when if I cut the 4 mon right here, drawing the 7M back becomes pretty cool because then we have 6-7, 6-7, and then we can think about dropping the 3P and then trying to get a sanshoku, fishing for a sanshoku, right? Because if we drop the 3P in that situation, we will actually have this 5, 6, 7, 8 shape plus 2, 6, 7, 6, 7s, and thus either side, like the next tile that we draw, 5, 8, from either suit that is not the pinzu, we can then decide which pinzu to cut and basically be guaranteed to be tenpai for a sanshoku. So just because of that, I think cutting the 4 mon here is the most advantageous, both to fish for improvements to our pinfu by looking for in the pinzu block, or by fishing for a sanshoku, which is a 2-tile change. So let's move on to the next question. So in this question, it's actually like a beautiful scenario. This is our dreams. This is what we live to see. We've arrived at truly the most beloved shape of all players, perfect Ishanten. Moreover, right, we have the luxury of choosing which Ishanten to take. And so, what would you cut here? Would somebody like to offer their opinion?
I have unmuted Moku to answer the next question. Moku, you're on. If Moku is muted and can't hear, though, I will unmute.
I've unmuted myself.
Oh,
okay.
Welcome, Moku.
Thank you. All right, so we've got we've got 2 completed sets, the 5, 6, 7 mons, 6, 7, 8, and pins. We're not going to touch those, and since we're Ishanten, we probably want to hold on to our pair of the 2 ipins, and so I'm guessing we either want to discard the 3-so or the 6-so in this case. It's still possible to potentially get a Sanshoku again there. Maybe you'll pick up the 8-mon or something, or I guess the 5-pin or something like that. So I'm gonna wait having the 6-7 as a Ryanmen more heavily, so I'll probably discard the 6-so in this scenario. And if I pick up the, the 3-so or something again, I might still get that Sanshoku or something. But it's probably very close. Maybe.
Yeah, so thank you for your opinion. So actually in this circumstance, I ended up choosing the 3-so. And obviously the Sanshoku is definitely very open, but I felt like the Sanshoku was not exactly impossible to get, even if we kept the extra 6-so. The reasoning here is going back to comparing two-sided weights, right? Because ideally, or in the vast majority of circumstances, both of these will become two-sided weights. We will end up having two Ryanmens. However, not all Ryanmens are the same. In this circumstance, I picked the 3-so because edge Ryanmens typically are stronger than middle Ryanmens, and so we kind of want to buff that up, right? We'd probably be willing, even though unhappy, to draw the 1-pin and then throw the 7-so, reaching on 1/4-so or something like that. It destroys our pin fu, but it's still a two-sided weight and one on the edge, so it's probably worth going for. Obviously, it depends a lot on what the actual board state is like, but in general, you kind of want to have an edge Ryanmen if you can. They're stronger than middle Ryanmens in general, and therefore 3-so for me is like just barely, I think, a better cut here. All right, so let's go on to the next one.
Tian, we have a comment on that one from Amrita Shower, who says, if you Riichi, you have a lower chance of hitting 3-so, right, for Ura?
I'm not really thinking about Ura in this situation.
I have unmuted Amrita Shower if he would like to speak with you about it.
Yeah, please have them.
Oh no, I was just going to say, in addition to what you said about a better weight, if you also end up having 3-sos there, I would think you'd also have a lower chance of hitting that pair for your Uradora if you Riichi, because this looks like a standard Riichi hand.
Yeah, so I mean, we are aiming for pin fu. The likelihood, the chances are we're going to end up winning this hand with only one pair, which would be the 2-pin, the 1-pins. And so, like, for me, I think confirming a better weight and then trying to boost up the slightly weaker Ryanmen block is kind of more important in my priorities than trying to read the Uro weight. All right. So
we have one additional question on this hand from Eric, who would like to know, is there any benefit to tossing the 6-so in an attempt to Tsuji trap the 3-so? In the end, either way, we end up tossing both with our ideal tosses. No other comment.
That's a very situational thing. Are you trying to get people to deal into you? Really, I'd say that at a certain level, Mahjong becomes very heavily based on sumoing, because people are either going to be pushing or people are going to be folding very cleanly with absolutely safe tiles. So I generally don't really count on people to be dealing in. That's not really what I expect from players. I think it's better to do what is most straightforward with our hand and then try to maximize our chances of getting the tiles that we need. If they are going to push, they're going to push it anyways. They're probably not going to throw it just because it's Tsuji. That's a very kind of it's a very kind of uncommitted kind of folding, right? And I don't really expect to see that. So I think the small difference that makes is not exactly outweighed by the importance of having good shapes and confirming improving weaker shapes and confirming ones that are already quite strong. Great, so let's move on to, this is a really quick page. I don't have the time because I can literally talk about 7 tile shapes for a long time. They're really fun, but I just want to remind you that when you're building your hand and when you get to Tenpai, complex shapes often are great for both boosting your tile acceptance when you're building your hand and your weight when you're trying to win your hand. So here are some common examples from just the few last week or two of my play. Hopefully in the future I'll have the opportunity to talk to you guys more in depth about them. For example, there is a lot of stuff that has already been written just about the 17 basic 7 tile shapes. And so just imagine there are so many topics to talk about there, right? For example, this is a really nice 7 tile shape. I pushed this like with a 2,000 point hand against dealer Riichi because the weight is so good. And like, of course, you probably get this because the weight is so good. So just stuff like this, it really helps your chances of both winning the hand and getting to Tenpai in the first place. So just keep this in mind. Often these complex shapes are much more powerful than just having an isolated block. So even though we started off the lecture by talking about the 5 blocks as like very separate blocks, don't forget that sometimes, you have 5 blocks, but some of them are complex and they take up 2 or 3 blocks as one shape. So let's take that from earlier and we'll put it into actual practice. Here we kind of can see 5 blocks, right? So would anybody like to first tell us how you see the 5 blocks, or where the complex shape is and how many blocks that takes up, and then tell me what you'd like to cut from this situation. This is truly a dream hand, by the way. So, I mean, obviously, I hope everyone gets very excited.
I have unmuted Yoko to go ahead and answer this question. Why don't you take it away, Scott?
All right. Can you guys hear me?
You're a little quiet, but I can hear you.
All right. Just want to make sure. Yeah. All right. I would cut, going by this, I would actually cut one of the 2-peen, making that the pair for that. I'd keep the 2 because that's 2, 3, 4 for that set. Yeah, so I would, from that, I would drop the, I would probably discard one of the 2-peen from the hand, so I already have the pair, so that's one less thing I would have to worry about. But as for the blocks, there's the 3, 4, 5, 6 of peen, the 3, 4 so, and the 2, 4 Manzu with the 7, 8 Manzu as the blocks for that hand.
Yeah, thank you so much. So in this situation, at least I divided it into 5 blocks this way. It was kind of a trick question because I divided it into kind of 3, right? So actually I thought of the 2, 4, 6, 8 as 1 block. This is actually the pinsus as 3 blocks, which is basically a pair and a 2 block 3-sided shape. And then finally we have 1 completed Sozu block. And from this, I ended up cutting the 8 mon from this block because this block is already too big and we don't really need the 8 mon here. So cutting the 8 mon, we confirm a Ryankan, right? And like Steve said, it's actually better than a pair plus a tile next plus a kanchan. It has 8 tiles of acceptance, right? We can make use of the 5 mon. We can also make use of the 3 mon. And so we'll keep the 2, 4, 6 Ryankan, and then here we have a really nice shape. We have this shape. It can accept 1, 3, 6 for just any tenpai, and it can also accept 4, 7 pin, which is what we're really going for, because that will give us what we really want, Riichi Tanya Sanshoku. And so, I mean, we'll be so happy even if we drew the 5 mon or the 3 mon like right now, but imagine this such a powerful Pinzu shape. You're waiting on one, not wait, but your tile acceptance for the Pinzu is 1, 3, 4, 6, 7. Like literally, like half of the Pinzu will help you out right here. And so this is a really great shape. All right, let's go to the next slide. So I have one more actual practice question, and this one is a bit more less straightforward, we'll say. And I wanted to introduce this one because this is the only question that has the board state as well. And it's the only question where, not the only question, but it's definitely a question where I think people are going to be definitely not in agreement.
Tian, it does appear that the screen is white right now. Oh, okay, it came in. Spoke too soon. Continue.
Thank you. So here is the situation. This is a middle late game situation, but now we kind of folded / drew our hand into 2 shanten or 1 shanten here. And so what blocks are you trying to choose between cutting, and what would you cut?
I have unmuted last week's lecturer, Crow, to answer this question.
Hello, everyone. So looking at this, the hand can be divided, looks like into 6 blocks here, so we'll start there. It's a 5, 6, 7, so pretty easy to see. The pair of 7s, the 1, 2, 3 pin, the pair of 8s, the 5, 6 mon, and the 1, 2 mon. So just looking at it, generally speaking, this 1, 2 mon is going to be the weakest shape. But at the same time, keeping a 2-sided pair with the 8s and the 7s isn't ideal either. It doesn't look like any of those have been discarded yet, but we have had 1 3-mon discarded. So just looking at that perspective, I would probably go after the 1 2-mon here. There's an argument to be made for discarding the 5-mon as well and keeping the 6 8 8 shape, but I think at the end of the day, I would personally prefer the 1 2-mon.
Thanks so much. So I really respect. I think you really described the situation very well. This is actually not a super happy situation. We're likely to have a relatively poor final shape, and thus the chances of us winning this hand are not extremely high at this moment. But yes, in this situation, I think the 1 2 mon is indeed the most effective play. We don't really need to think about folding just yet, and so I cut the 1 2 mon here. And I did that for 2 reasons. One, because it's simply the weakest and least likely to improve block, but also because the 7 pins, even though I cut the 9 pin, the 7 pins could still grow into a 2-sided weight. And ideally, like in the true miracle situations, we draw a 6 and a 5, and then we'd be reaching on or even damoing for Pinfu Sanshoku Aka. And so that's why I cut the 1 2 here. In the end, I'll show you how the hand progressed. I ended up quickly after dropping the 1 2, drawing into this great shape, and then chasing a Riichi with a normal Pinfu Riichi Pinfu Dora 1 shape. Didn't win this hand, but I just thought to show how this could progress. Thinking about kind of secondary improvements to your hand, right? Not like immediately how your blocks look, but also how your blocks could improve in the future. Yeah, so let's move on. So we're going to talk a little bit now about exceptions. I think we've done some practice about how to choose blocks in the normal situation. And so here are some cases of exceptions. So in this situation, I think this is a really good exercise for us. Do you want to try identifying some blocks in this hand, and what are the strong blocks, what are the weak blocks, and what would you do in this situation?
I have unmuted Xenolast to answer this question.
All right. Can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
All right. So we have a block with the 9-7 mon. We have a 1-2 so. We have 5-5-6 so, 8-8-9 so, and we have the 2 Chuns with the Hatsu and the West, which I always forget the Japanese name of. And it looks like we could do two things, really. If we're focusing on the 2 blocks on the left, we could go for what's possibly a faster hand by getting rid of the West and the Hatsu. But just looking at the ridiculous number of so we have in the hand, I would probably personally consider getting rid of the 9-7 mon and seeing if either I can pick up another Hatsu or another West to use it as a pair and maybe call in the Chun and go for what looks like a kind of fast Onitsu with the 8-8-9 and the 5-5-6.
Thank you so much for your answer, and I really do like how you saw through my trap here, because there are actually 2 things that are trick questions. The first is that there is about 6 blocks in this picture in reality, and the second is trying to think about the West and the Hatsu as tiles that you can improve on, and in reality, thinking about Sha and Hatsu as like in a block together, which does not really make a lot of sense, right? Because you can't use them together, but you're trying to grow them together, or you're trying to grow one of them, right? And so, personally, I thought that this hand is best thought of as having 6 blocks right now. You can vaguely separate the Sozu into about 3 blocks. These are not perfect separations, especially between the 5-5-6 and the 8-8-9s. You can see you can kind of read the Chun pair as one block, and then the Sha and the Hatsu as one block, and finally the 7-9 mon kanchan as one block. And so in this circumstance, technically, 7-9 kanchan is a superior shape than 2 random floating honor tiles. That's for sure. And however, if you're in a flat point situation and you're not specifically trying to get like the fastest hand possible, like, because the exception to this would be if you're trying to get a 1,000 point hand to end the game in first place. In most situations, you'd probably be well served to cut the 7-9 Manzu shape here. You try to grow the Sha and the Hatsu, perhaps pick up one of them so that you can use them as a pair. But there are some other reasons why that's probably a good idea. The first is that the general quality of shapes in this hand are quite low. You don't really have a Ryankan other than the 5-6. You have kanchans, you have penchans, you have not super, you have like pretty slow shapes. And so they're going to be less likely to complete than your opponent's hands. And it's going to be harder to call unless you open for 1,000 points with the Chun. And so with that Honitsu, this hand is basically going to be a real struggle for not very much reward. Now, on the other hand, going Honitsu here is good because it allows you to keep more honor and win tile floaters, right? You get to keep these tiles in your hand longer, which also gives you a good defense as you try to build your hand. So this is kind of an exception to block theory, right? Instead of choosing the fastest or nicest blocks you have, you kind of actually cut a better block in search of a specific Yaku. All right, so now that we've talked about 5-block theory, it's finally time to move on to 5-block theories like really scary cousin that lives in the closet, 6-block theory. And so the first thing we'll talk about is the basics of what 6-block theory is, and it really refers to thinking about your hand with 6 blocks. And this is very common and particularly useful when you have kind of a tricky hand in the early stages, when you're really just starting with your hand as it's dealt, you're trying to find out where it's going to complete, where the hand is going to go, how you want to take this hand, and that's when you try to kind of think about it as 6 blocks. And so here, I've chosen this isn't even the question, this is just your basic 6 block nightmare, right? You have two-sided shapes, you have 6 of them, you have to pick one to cut, but they're both pretty similar. I mean, obviously, so the edge ones are slightly more likely to complete. If you're playing with reds, right, you kind of also want to fish around for the 6-7s because they can pick up the red 5s. Both of these technically give you a small chance of Sanshoku. It's a very hard situation. And so when you're in 6 block, you're kind of constantly faced with, why am I keeping 6 options open when I only need 5? Why am I doing this? And so actually, it's very situational. And in the next couple of slides, I'll definitely show you exactly why 6 block theory can be helpful, but also a lot of situations in which you might not actually want to go into 6 block theory.
Tian,
So
the crowd, aka me, has a very simple question here. When I looked at it, I thought I saw 7 blocks, but you said 6 blocks. So could you just explain what I'm missing?
oh my gosh. We're gonna just disregard this picture because I may have mismade it very recently. So we're gonna pretend like there are actually 6 blocks here instead of 7. But usually we'll look at 6 blocks. Now you found out my secret, which is I have a trouble counting up to 6. And so we'll move on. Anyways, so here are some times when keeping kind of 6 blocks floating in your hand may become more viable. However, there are a lot of times when you don't want to do that. So it's often tempting, especially in the beginning, right, to go for 6 blocks because you can prevent yourself from giving up on any block altogether. And the upside is that 6 block hands do give you slightly better tile acceptance at 2 shanten. The downside is when you get to 1 shanten, you have this useless tile from the 6 block that you're now breaking up, which actually could be in another of your 5 blocks, helping increase your tile acceptance at 1 shanten. So what you're really trading for, right, is you're trading tile acceptance at 2 shanten for worse tile acceptance at 1 shanten. That is almost always what is the trade-off when you're doing 6 block theory. And so in general, in the modern kind of mahjong that has been kind of promoted in Japan, 6 block style is really an exceptional situation. Is only exceptional. It's for kind of moments of exception, situations that are not quite the ordinary. And so the 2 main situations that one would do this are, 1, when you're hedging your bets and trying to fish for a particular hand or yaku, or 2, because you don't want to cut the weakest block as identified by 5 block theory because of a specific and particular read on the board or of the wall that you have made and that you trust yourself to do. And so here I'm going to take a couple concepts that are from a blog post by Wolotani Yumi Pro, one of the greatest M-leaguers currently playing and a pro with JPML. And so in this situation, we do have 6 blocks, right? So we have the 2-3-4 as 1 block, 6-7 mon as 1 block, a pair of the 2 so's, the 4-5-5 as 1 block, 9-9 pin as 1 block, and then Haku as the 6th block. So from this situation, there are 2 approaches that you can do. And so I would like to have someone in the audience identify what would you cut if you were playing the 5 block method and what you would cut if you were playing the 6 block method.
I have unmuted Dingo from the crowd for this one. Take it away, Dingo.
Oh, all right. So let me see what we have here. So, what is the Tsumo tile? Is that a 4-man?
That is the 4-man, yeah.
Okay. So, 6 block theory would be 2-3-4, 6-7, 2-2, 4-5-5, 9-9, and white, right? That's 6. I think that's 6. So, this actually seems. I think it kind of depend on what exactly we want to do here. If we want to go for a quick hand, I'll probably just go ahead and drop 5 men. So we have larger acceptance for a quick man with either calling something and dropping one of the pairs. This could maybe 1, 2, 3. This could also maybe be Shitoi potential if we start drawing pairs. So I think it kind of depends, but for a quick hand, I would probably go ahead and drop 5 pin. Or maybe I'll go for a 9 pin drop instead. It doesn't seem that bad. We can keep the 4-5-5 shape for now. So yeah, I think I'm changing my answer and I'm dropping 9 pin, the 9 pin pair here.
So you're very insightful because you actually gave both answers, and both of them are right. That's cool. And so in this situation, right, if you break this into 5 blocks and try to play 5 block theory, right, you're going to say, I have 6 blocks, I should cut the weakest block. And the weakest block, like you said, is indeed 9 pin. And so if you play 5 block theory here, you would cut the 9 pin because that is the 9 pin pair is your weakest block, and you would cut that from your hand. Now, this is a situation in which, for example, Wotani Pro would go for the 6 block method. And this is because she says, like in this situation, poning the Haku and poning the 1 and 2 so, they both look pretty good options. They look good. She thinks that she can get them. And so in this circumstance, instead of trying to strengthen the 4-5-5 block, she just cuts the 5 pin, says, okay, the Ryankan is fine as it is. We don't need the extra 5 acceptance. I'm going to cut the 5 pin here and then try to fish around to see which of the 2 pairs other than my Haku are going to be completed. And so in this circumstance, you have 2 answers. The one is whether if you're looking at it as a 5 block situation. The second is you're looking at it as a 6 block situation. So let's do one more of these questions. So in this circumstance, right, again, you're faced with having realistically 6 blocks here. So would anybody like to offer up what they think they would do if they were playing 5 block method and what you would do if you were playing 6 block method?
I unmuted Andre. Andre, why don't you try this one?
Hey, can you guys hear me? This is when I worry that the timer won't be enough. So if I'm going 5 blocks, I'm probably looking to drop my weakest block, right? The weakest block to me looks like the 1-3 so. So probably start by dropping the 1 so. The 6 block theory would say, let's keep my options open. So let's fix the Ryankan on 7-8-8 by dropping the 8.
Everyone clap for, I know you're all muted, but let's all clap for Andre. You guys are getting it already. I'm very proud of everybody. All right, so let's go on to some more tips on when to use 6 block. So here are some additional exceptions on when you can use 6 block. And again, it really has to do with those situations in which you want those Ryankan weights, and you're willing to try, and you know that maybe at Ishanten you're going to be struggling a little bit because you can't get the perfect Ishanten shape anymore. But you're like, okay, I just want 2-sided weights. I want good weights. And sometimes there are those situations, right? For example, this is a situation that's you might encounter more if you play in a rule set that really punishes being last place. But say you want to build a hand that has a lot of value, but the dealer is the person that's in last place, and you know that no matter if you reach it or not, that dealer is cornered into the wall. They are like a cornered fox, and they are going to push to you. They are going to chase you down, no matter what shanten they are. And you just have to have you need to guarantee that your weight is strong enough to kind of outweigh that danger. In that situation, six block theory can become really nice. And so in this is a situation that I just created. It isn't from a recent game. But for example, if you have this hand and you really want to win it because Naiso is Dora or something, but you're currently on the South dealer of last place. Last place is dealer in South round, right? You might be willing to just cut the seven pin, take the Ryankan, and then try to fish for either the 4-mon or the 6-mon, something like that. And so even though when you're playing with 5 block theory, you would cut either the 1 or the 9 right now and then guarantee, 5 okay-ish blocks, the 6 block theory will say for you to cut the 7 pin right here. Just because you're going to be fishing around, hopefully, the best ideal scenario is you just fish yourself into a 2-mon or an 8-mon, and then you can cut the other pinch on then. But in any case, keeping both those kanchans as it is right now increases your chances of ending the hand in tenpai with a Ryankan weight. And so, if you absolutely need to have that Ryankan because you know that someone is going to chase you, or someone is going to try and fight you, then 6 block theory here is actually quite useful. And there's a lot of these exceptions, and so I added this in just before the presentation today because I was reading one of the books. But yes, so recently Yusei, who is a Tenho player, came out with a book called Jisunde Yokudekiru, and it means yokuderu, oftentimes these situations come up in actual play, and he gave a really good general tip. And he says that when you're 2-3 shanten in the early game, in the first row of discards before turn 6, 6 block theory is pretty good. It works really well for those situations. So if you just need a quick rule of hand, 6 blocks until turn 6 is a good kind of thing. Later on, right in the later game, you're going to have to try and start narrowing your hand down to 5 blocks, both so that you can keep safe tiles, both that you can maximize. You can have things to fold on, and get ready to either decide to completely fold your hand or actually go and push for tenpai or winning the hand itself. The final exception I'm going to bring up with you guys is when you need to float another block because you don't absolutely want to cut the door up, right? And this is really useful for many of us because we play Riichi in WRC. And in Riichi and WRC, this is no Akadora rules. There are only 4 Dora unless somebody goes and just kanyas, which means Dora truly is so powerful in this full set. And so in this situation, if we are really early game, it is very, very, plausible that we cut the 7 cell right here. Obviously, 5 block theory would say cut the Dora. What are you doing? Just get rid of it. Take the really nice Ishan-10. But in this kind of situation, cutting the 7 cell is quite common. And what we do is we cut the 7 cell and then we start praying for something to pick up something as a Ryankan, right? In this circumstance, we would be amazingly happy if we draw the 3 pin, the 4 pin, the 6 pin, and even the 5 pin another itself, right? Imagine getting another Dora and then just dropping your West pair or something like that. So in this kind of circumstance, especially in the early game, floating the Dora itself as its own block makes a lot of sense, right? So ideally, we get into the kind of this situation. In this situation, we're faced with a typical 6 block decision. We have to choose another block to cut. And again, because edge weights are probably better than middle weights, we might actually end up dropping the 6-7. So that really then depends on the board state because it is such a minute difference between the 6-7 and the 2-3 that it really is based on how you think the tiles are looking in front of you at that moment. But yeah, so that is most of the content that I've prepared for today. For any of you that just like, oh, I really want to read more about 5 blocks. I really want to get into this. I really want to read more about 6 blocks. I've prepared to you in my slides some supplemental reading, some additional resources. The first one, really important, do go and read Riichi Book 1. Riichi Book 1 is truly the best resource for English players at the moment, and there's an entire chapter, 20 pages of content that Dana Chiba wrote about 5-block method. So please go read that. That's your greatest introduction that you can get. Rosti, who's active on the Mahjong and competitive Riichi Hub discords, has written a guide about 5-block theory. And then here I also leave you some examples of really great WWYD books that are published in Japanese. Perhaps with English translations out there, I'm not super clear, but I think these are great books, quite easy to understand even if you don't read Japanese, that can help you kind of work through like early game situations. And of course, I'm always willing to give you recommendations or explain details personally, so I've left my Discord information as well. You can also just add me in the chat, whatever. I'll be your friend. It's all good. So finally, I have one big question, which is, what happens when you do when block theory fails? And this goes back to the beginning, right? When I told you that 97% of hands are built normally, which means 2 to 3% are not built normally. And so what do you do? And the answer is not kokushi. It's 7 pairs. And, one day I'm really looking forward to spending an entire lecture telling you guys and talking to you guys and just expressing my deep dedication for the man that basically has made 7 pairs happen, the great Tsuchida. So thank you. Hopefully 5 and 6 blocks will serve you well. If not, stay tuned and we'll talk about 7 blocks before you know it. Thank you so much and have a good evening. And also I'll be doing 10 rolls, so join me on screen share for that afterwards.
All right, thank you very much, Tian. If anyone has any final questions before Tian runs back away, feel free to type them into chat. Other than that, this concludes our second lecture series. It is also the second week of our 5-year plan to have this positive score on Riichi out. So we didn't see a big increase after last week's lecture, but we're still working on application. So, a lot of weeks left to come. Hopefully everyone will enjoy it. There is another lecture coming up next week, and all the information is both on our calendar and pinned. Please let me know if you don't have access to that calendar or an invite to any of our upcoming lectures. Other than that, feel free to either log off, ask more questions in chat. The mods are now going to start unmuting everybody so that we can all go about our day and or watch Tian do 10 rolls on stream. So thank you all very much for coming again. We'll work on getting you all off mute.
Thank you so much for hosting this event. It was actually really fun. It's been very anxious, but oh my god, the mods, Claire and Pio and everyone else at really nice. So thank you for making it way less stressful than it could have.